Okay, here is the text that Lord Chaitanya is quoting from Vishnu Purana. Vishnu Shakti Parah Prokta Kshetragyahya Tatha Para Avidya Karma Sangyanya Tritiya Shakti Rishyate. The internal potency of the Supreme Lord Vishnu is spiritual as verified by the Shastras. There is another spiritual potency known as Kshetragya, or the living entity. The third potency, which is known as nescience, makes a living entity godless and fills him with fruitive activity. Now, prior to this, Lord Chaitanya had referred to a different scriptural statement from the Upanishads, which point out how the Supreme Absolute Truth has multiple potencies. And this particular text from the Vishnu Purana is actually an explanation of what those multifarious potencies are. Now, let me show you what that text that Lord Chaitanya is referring to is. Again, Shvetashvatar Upanishad. Na tasya karyam karanam cha vidyate na tat chamas na tat samaschabhyadikasya drishyate parasya shaktir vividhaiva shruyate swabhaviki jnanabalakriyacha. He has no material work to perform, nor any material senses with which to perform it. No one can be found who is equal to or greater than him. From the Vedas, we hear how that Supreme Lord possesses multifarious energies, the potencies of knowledge, strength, and action, each of which acts autonomously. Notice here, para asya shakti vividha eva shruyate shakti, potency. He has supreme potency. He has a spiritual potency. And that potency is what has been described in the Vishnu Purana. So Lord Chaitanya is making a chain of arguments here. He points out how the Supreme Brahman is Sashaktika, so Shaktiman, has potencies. In other words, he's a person. Only a person is potent. The impersonal Brahman is not the possessor of energy. And therefore, the impersonal Brahman as conceived of by the Mayavadis simply doesn't exist. The energy of the living entities is technically called Kshetragya energy. This Kshetragya Shakti, although equal in quality with the Lord, becomes overpowered by material energy out of ignorance and thus suffers all sorts of material miseries. In other words, the living entities are located in the marginal energy between the superior spiritual and inferior material energies. And in proportion to the living entity's contact with either the material or spiritual energies, the living entity is situated in proportionately higher and lower levels of existence. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur shed some light on this by saying that the Supreme Lord's superior energy refers to Radharani, and his inferior energy refers to Maya Rani. The living entity is not a queen. The living entity has to be under one of the two queens, has to be under Maya or under Radha. If we choose to serve under Srimati Radharani, then we are peaceful in our situation. Krishna Bhakta Nishkam Atev Shanta. Because yes, a pure devotee has no desire other than to satisfy Krishna. This is Srimati Radharani's great desire, that all of us come back to serving Krishna the way she is serving Krishna. Otherwise, we have to suffer under Maya Rani. Daivihiyasha gunamayi mamamaya duratyaya. And she simply gives us misery. Shoka moha bhaya. Misery. Shoka moha, delusion. And bhaya, fear. So the living entity is in the marginal energy. The living entity is neither this nor that. He is not the internal potency, nor is he the external potency. He is the marginal potency, Tatastha Shakti. And in proportion to the living entity's contact with either the material or spiritual energies, he is either, if he is in touch with the spiritual energy, he is in a higher state of existence. Otherwise, he is in a lower state of existence. The lower state of existence is called the state of conditioned life, and the higher state of existence is called liberated life. So the living entities are either liberated or they are conditioned. Prakriti kavalitan tad vimuktamscha bhavat. According to the living entity's own attitude towards the Supreme Lord, he could be under the clutches of Maya, or he could be fully liberated from Maya. The Lord is beyond the inferior and marginal energies as above mentioned, and his spiritual energy is manifested in three different phases as eternal existence, eternal bliss, and eternal knowledge. As far as eternal existence is concerned, it is conducted by the Sandhini potency. Similarly, bliss and knowledge are conducted by the Hladini and Samvit potencies respectively. As the Supreme Energetic Lord, he is the supreme controller of the spiritual, marginal, and material energies. And all these different types of energies are connected with the Lord in eternal devotional service. So the idea is the spiritual energy has three different phases. It has three different sub-aspects. The Sandhini existence potency, the Hladani bliss potency, and the Samvit knowledge potency. Now this is an elaborate subject, but in summary I will simply note that these three sub-aspects of the internal potency have been spelled out in the Vishnu Purana, which Lord Chaitanya gives in his quote here. Prabhupada is actually summarizing it here. And Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has explicitly quoted from the Vishnu Purana as evidence for this. And this is recorded in Chaitanya Charitamrita. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is thus enjoying in his transcendental eternal form. Is it not astounding that one dares to call the Supreme Lord non-energetic? The Lord is the controller of all energies, and the living entities are parts and parcels of one of the energies. Therefore, there is a gulf of difference between the Lord and the living entities. How then can one say that the Lord and the living entities are one and the same? See, the Supreme Lord, he is the controller, and the living entities are the controlled. The Lord controls all these energies. Lord Chaitanya has already given evidence for that. The living entities, from the Vishnu Purana evidence that we saw, belongs to the second of the Lord's threefold energies. So the living entities are parts and parcels of one of his energies, and the Supreme Lord is the whole, and he is the controller of the living entities. So how can one claim that ultimately the truth is the living entities and the Lord are one and the same? How can one say that? There is so much of difference between the Lord and the living entities. The Lord is the controller and the living entities are the control. In the Bhagavad Gita also, the living entities are described as belonging to the superior energy of the Lord. Where do we find this in the Bhagavad Gita? We find this here. Apare mitastvanyam prakritim vidhime param jiva bhutam mahabaho yayedam dharyate jagat. 7.5 in Bhagavad Gita. Besides these, O mighty armed Arjuna, there is another superior energy of mind which comprises the living entities who are exploiting the resources of this material inferior nature. Just for contrast, I will read out the previous text. Bhumirapo nalovayo khammano buddhirevacha ahankara iti yamme bhina prakritirashtadha. Earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and false ego. Altogether, these 8 constitute my separated material energies. After that, he said that besides this material energy, there is another superior energy of mine, and here the living entities are set out to be within the superior energy of Krishna. So we understand that the matter is his inferior energy and the living entities are his superior energy. So because the living entities are his superior energy, they are under his control, and that is what Prabhupada is referring to here, that the living entities are described as belonging to the superior energy of the Lord. According to the principles of intimate correlation between the energy and the energetic, both of them are non-different also. Shakti Shaktimato Abheda. There is no difference between the Shakti and the Shaktiman. Where is this stated? The idea that the living entity is the energy is non-different from the energetic has been expressed here in Madhvacharya's commentary to Srimad Bhagavatam. This is first canto, first chapter, text 18. In his commentary, he quotes from a scripture called Vishnu Samhita, and there he mentions this. Look at this: Shakti Shaktimatos Chapi Na Bheda Kaschana Ishyate. There is no difference between the Shakti and Shaktiman. of any type. So there are statements in the scriptures from which we understand that there is no distinction between the Lord and his energies. Therefore, the Lord and the living entities are non-different as the energy and the energetic. So it is in this sense that the Lord is non-different uh, from his superior energies, the living entities. Earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and ego are all inferior energies of the Lord, but the living entities are different from all as superior energy. This is a version of Bhagavad Gita 7.4 to 5. The transcendental form of the Lord is eternally existent and full of transcendental bliss. How then can such a form be a product of the material mode of goodness? Anyone, therefore, who does not believe in the form of the Lord is certainly a faithless demon, and as such is untouchable and not to be seen persona non grata, fit to be punished by the Platonic king. So the idea is that one who does not accept the form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead as being transcendental is certainly understood to be demoniac. This has been well established and well stated by the scriptures. There are several places where this has been brought out. Here's a quote from the Brihad Vishnu Smriti. Yo veti bhautikam deham krishnasya pramatmana sa sarvasmad bahishkarya shauta smarta vidhanatah mukham tasya avalokyapi sachelam snanamacharet. One who considers the body of Krishna to be material should be driven out from all rituals and activities of the Shruti and the Smriti. And if one by chance sees his face, one should at once take bath in the Ganges to rid himself of infection. In fact, it clearly says if one simply looks at his face, one should take bath with his clothes on. Sachelam snanam acharet. Because he thinks that the body of Krishna, who is the Paramatma, to be material. This is such a very, very great offense. So this is a sample, but there are several other statements which point out that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is totally spiritual. He is not material at all, and one who considers him to be a material being, he is certainly meant to be punished, because the Supreme Personality of Godhead has a spiritual form. This is also established with evidences by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur in his commentary to the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 18, where he points out that there are certain persons, the impersonalists, the Mayavadi impersonalists, they simply go to hell for considering Krishna to be having a material body, and therefore they are asuric and they are fit to be punished. It's a very, very dangerous, deep offense, and they will be certainly punished because of this.